Hello, friends. Welcome. We are finishing our last lecture of week 7, which is actually pretty insane. Which just means that we are really cruising, really almost done. We are 1 week away from you guys getting an email saying welcome to your next stack, whether that's through Java or through projects and algorithms. So insane. Way to go. You guys are almost done. A couple different things for housekeeping. As always, you have discussion questions that are due Sunday. You do have discussion questions due next Sunday as well. So please just go do those now. They're both open. Just knock it out, especially if that's the last thing. I would hate for you to get a good grade on the belt exam and to do all of your assignments and then this be the thing that makes you have to do a retake or hold you back. No, thank you. So please make sure you go do those. You do have a core assignment this week called authors. So please be aware of, remember, you need 90% of your core assignments completed in order to move forward. So if you've done all of them up to this through week 6, all of the kind of everything up to the product manager 1, 2, and 3. If you've done all that, technically you don't have to do authors. I believe that'll get you because there's 14 that'll still keep you at the 90%. But it's good practice. I mean, what else are you going to do, right? So there's that. Belt exam retake codes. I sent those out yesterday to people that had asked for them. I do have a couple exams that I need to grade. I will let you know by tomorrow. And if you do need a retake, I will give you another retake code. Just as a reminder, you've got a couple different dates that are important. Next Tuesday is the last day to start an exam. I know most of you guys have taken it, but next Tuesday is the last day to start an exam. And the next Wednesday is the last day to turn in everything, all of your assignments, to turn in these discussion questions for this week. So please make sure you do those early. You can't wait till Sunday. Unfortunately, they are due Wednesday. And again, remember, you have 24 hours from the exam date to start this, or sorry, you have 24 hours on Tuesday. Once you get it, you can start it, and then you have to start it by Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. And if you, once you start it, you have 24 hours. So in theory, you can, the last day to turn in an exam is Wednesday, the 29th. So if you do ask me on Friday, can I get an exam code? I'm going to say no, unfortunately, because we've been very clear with this. You do get up to 3 chances, but if you don't use them all, then that is up to you. You don't have to, but up to 3 does not mean a guaranteed 3. So if you wait until Tuesday to start your first exam, well, then that really means you only get 1 shot. So please, please, please make sure you guys are being aware of that. We're continuing our back end. We're just going to finish our back end. I actually think it's going to be pretty light, pretty simple today. I don't know that we'll go the full hour. We're going to talk about web tokens, JSON web tokens. We're going to talk about cookies. We're going to set that up in our code. We're going to set up our register with that. We're going to set up a login and how that'll operate, and we'll think through that. And then we'll set up a log out. We're just going to follow with the platform with that. Should be pretty simple, pretty kind of bare bones. Something that you should be aware of for sure. Cool. Oops, wrong thing. Great. Any questions on that? Any questions on anything that we have talked about? Anything that we're doing? Any questions from yesterday? Just as a reminder, what we did yesterday was we started to build our backend. We talked through a couple different things. We talked through within our server we talked through bcrypt, and we understood what hashing a password is going to do for us, right? And so in our controller, we looked at that. We also talked through using like a potential user. So we want to check and make sure before somebody even registers, how would we make sure that if somebody doesn't already have that email? And so in our models, we also walked through a couple different things. We did bcrypt. We used a validator package. This is different than the platform. We use a validator package to validate that the email is correct. The platform shows you how to do regex. Just wanted to show you another way to do it. We talked about virtual attributes where we can do this confirm password. We haven't built the form. That's what we're going to do on Monday. But we can do this confirm password. And this is a virtual attribute. It doesn't actually get saved in our database, but it's a way that we can then compare and make sure that they are the same. So upon registration, upon being created, this is all here. Now, note, we don't have to have any of that stuff in our actual creation. If we just run this .create right here, basically that it passes and says, nope, this is not an email that's currently in use. So we are good to go there. As long as we have that, then we can create. And what Mongoose's middleware does is it handles all this stuff for us. It creates our virtual attribute. It runs this validate function, make sure it's valid first, and then it runs this hash where it saves a password as a hash. And we saw that in Postman, where we tried to create a user, and then we had this password, and here's our password with our hash. Again, remember, we don't know what this is. Only Bcrypt will know this. You should never save a password as plain text, and no company should ever say this is your password in plain text, because then that means that their stuff is not valid. So please, please, please do not use a company that does that. So we want to make sure that we are not that company. So we hash our password, and then that's what gets saved into our database. Any questions on what we've done, what we're doing, where we're going?
Just going back to that virtual.
Yeah.
So this dot underscore confirm password, does that value always have to have an underscore?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. Okay, well, let's continue then. There's quite a few things that we need to do. We're kind of following the platform a little bit, not fully, but partly. Again, we've altered and changed. Oh my gosh, I hate Stage Manager sometimes. We have altered and done a couple different things. So what I want to talk about is we are moving forward, and we are, if we look at our class overview, we're going to talk about web tokens, cookies, and we're going to finish setting up our backend. So with that, what I want to talk about is this idea of .env. So when you are building an application, we want to make sure that we can have some environment variables. This can vary on what we're wanting to do. We're going to see with a web token, we're going to have sort of this secret kind of key or token that we can save as an environment variable that's going to be used for certain things. There's also other things that we will want to save, but we don't want other people to know. Does anybody have a thought about maybe what could be something that we could save as an environment variable? And that's just something that we need to run, but we don't want other people to know. Any other thoughts? What is something that maybe we've talked about it a couple classes ago? If we wanted to use tools from other companies, what might we have that we don't want others to see?
Oh, like the PEM key?
PIM key, kind of.
we're
PIM key is
talking
going to be
about
like
like a-
deployment sort of stuff. But what about like an API key?
Okay.
What if
I was gonna
my-
say either PEM key or an API key, because both of
Yeah.
those things can be charged money.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so if we've got some sort of API key that is really makes our project work, we need to be able to pass that in. What I want to do is, instead of just putting that plainly in sight, right? That way, if somebody gets our code or gets access to our code, then they will be able to get our API key, and therefore we will get, there's the ability for us to get charged. If there's some API call, we have to pass in that key. If we just pass that in, sort of similar to a password, right? We don't want people to know what that is or to use that. And so we want to protect ourselves from our users or from other people doing that. So what we can do is we can come in and we can install .env. That's a package that is really, really, really popular, both, and it's just not just JavaScript perspective, but like Python.env is a really popular, like that's what I use when I write Python scripts. And it is just a package that allows us to use these environment variables and call from what we're going to create is a .env file. And so what we can do is with this package, we can say, hey, I want to, in my .env file, I've got a variable called, I don't know, secret key. I want you to put that value here, but I don't want it to actually show the secret key. And so .env allows us to kind of keep all this stuff secret. And we've already installed this. So what we need to do here is go into our code. And it's going to be the same level as it's going to be within our server, but we're going to have a new file and we're just going to call it .env. Fairly simple, right? .env. And you can already see that my, I have like a package. I couldn't tell you what it's called. That takes up, like if this is Git, it's got like this little, Git logo, or if it's got JS, it's got this. .env is something that will be recognized and it knows that. But here in this file is where we're going to put all of our secret stuff. So we're actually, and we see that on the platform, we can create something called like secret key. Now it is pretty common to have your environment. Why? I don't quite know. Like I know in Python, it's because you can't really have a constant. So, if you want something to be constant, you would, in the same way that we have a constant in JavaScript, you put everything caps, but it is a popular thing to have your keys in your environment or your environment variable names into all caps and using snake case. So we'll do the same thing. We don't have to say, because this is not a JavaScript file, this is a .env file, hence .env, right? So we don't have to say like let or anything like that. We just put our key name. Now this will work if you do lowercase, but you want to make sure that you're following tradition, because that's, I don't know, developers are rude sometimes. So I'm just going to call this some secret key. Perfect. Cool. So, and this is a miss that a lot of people often have. The minute we create a .env, we have to go into our git ignore and then also say .env. If you don't, this super secret file, if you were to post this to GitHub, will get posted on GitHub. So if you don't have this ignore, even though this is where all of our stuff lives, if you forget to do that and you post it on GitHub, people can just go into your .env and see it. And you definitely don't want that. So make sure the minute after you do a .env, go to your git ignore and put in .env here. So now it's going to forget that and it's not going to do that. When you're actually hosting in the cloud, there will be areas that you can put environment variables, or even in GitHub, if you're trying to host on GitHub pages, there's a little section in the settings that you can add in environment variables. But we never want to upload our .env file to GitHub itself. Cool. So we've already installed .env. We can look at that here in my package JSON. We should have .env. Cool, we're good to go. I'm going to run that real fast. Because I just copy and pasted. I just copy and pasted this. I'm going to CD into server. I know you guys can't see it, but npm install. Just to make sure all is well. Cool. Yep, we're good to go. So now I have all this good stuff. I got this node modules, unfortunately. Great. Cool. So we've added in our .env file. This is going to allow us to have our secret key, and we're going to use this. Again, we can have as many secret keys as we want. If you can have a whole list of secret keys, and just however you refer to it here is how we are going to refer to it in our actual platform, or in our actual code, but it's going to look a little bit different. So once we do this, we need to go into our server.js, and then we need to require our .env. So now that we have this created, let's go ahead and require it. So you can do it sort of in a couple of places, doesn't really matter, but we can just say require, and then I'm going to bring this in right here, and I'm going to say .env. I'm going to say .env.config, and that should be on the platform right there. Yep. And so this is invoking our function, so that way we can actually access it. And the way that we can access this is by doing something like this. We can create a variable, or wherever we want to call that secret value, And the way that .env, the package works is if you just say process .env and then whatever your secret keys name is, it's going to take that value. So in this case, first key value. And this, if we were to print, would my first secret will be this string right here. So you say process.env first secret key. Cool. Any questions on .env? Here's some documentation that we can open up. It is an NPM package, but again, it is spread out all over. So it's not just NPM. I think Python, you have to download it. It's called Python -.env or something like that. But but this is a great way. Like I use this all the time when I'm dealing with AWS. If I've got an S3 bucket that I want to look at, or if I want to, hide what region my data is in or something like that. This is I use a .env file for that. Cool. Great. So now we need to talk about our JSON web token. Now, if you guys are familiar with Python or Java, you probably used session to sort of keep track of our user. And as they're going throughout the website, we're able to say like, oh, this is our user because we use session, or we had some sort of data saved kind of persistently that allowed them to track. Well, it operates a little bit different. Session isn't something that's really going to be like utilized from like a enterprise perspective. JSON web tokens and cookies is really what we're going to use because it's a lot more secure. It's very similar to bcrypt. What we're going to do is we're going to take some part of information and we'll build out sort of how that's going to work. But we're going to take some piece of information and then we are going to create basically a hash that people don't really know what it means. It'll be a little bit more challenging. That way we can protect any sort of information if it's a user ID or an email or whatever we want to do. So there's a couple of different things. We have already downloaded and used this JSON web token, right? We've already been able to do that. So now we can do a few things. We can use our web token, and this is going to be generated whenever we are registering a user, right? So once they are registered and they've signed up, we want to give them a web token or an identifier so that way they can navigate through our project. So in that, we're going to go to our controllers. And there's a couple things that I've got to do. First off, I've got to say const JWT equals require JSON web token. Now, this is going to bring us in this const JWT. Oops. You can name it whatever you want. If it was cupcake, you saw that it could be named JSON web token. JWT is way faster than saying JSON web token, because if we refer to JWT, I can have access to all of its methods. If you guys remember when we talked about class and the methods that JWT has. So we're going to use those methods in order to create a new token. Again, you can call this JSON web token. You could really do that, but JWT is much faster to type. Cool. Now, once we've done that, we can actually go ahead and create our token. We already have it downloaded. So let's go back to our register real fast. We have a couple things that's going on here. We are checking and saying, is this user currently in my database, right? This is when somebody's trying to register for our site. And we've already checked with Postman that this works. If the email already exists, we get this message that says email already exists. If not, right, if potential user is not a thing, meaning that this email doesn't already exist, then what we're saying is we want to create a new user. So we're creating that new user. Great. Now, after we create a new user, what we want to do is we want to create this web token, right? So instead of giving our response, first I need to create a web token. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const user token. And this is the way that we're going to be able to, again, allow our user to navigate from our backend. And then a cookie is really going to be client facing, but they're going to work simultaneously. And we're going to add in, we're going to create this token, and our JWT has a couple different methods, but sign is what we're going to use. If I hover over this, there's a couple things that you can see that our JWT has. First, it takes in a payload. This is what do we want to save and what information do we want to have access to, right? What information do we want to have access to? Is it an ID? Is it an email? We normally won't want, that's what this payload stands for. We normally don't want that as our entire user object. It just doesn't make sense to have, like if there's some sensitive information or email or password, and that's just super accessible and people can figure that out. So we want to limit what information. Usually it's just going to be some sort of ID, maybe an email, so we can use email too. That's going to be our payload. The second thing is going to be our secret key. So we're going to need to create our secret key first and foremost. And this is going to, as we hash and create this token that has these, couple properties in a hashed way, that's what this secret token is going to be, right? This .env, the secret key. You can typically just do like a random generated string of 32 characters, and that can add in. In this case, we just had it say some secret key, but this could be a different value, right? You could like actually generate a secret key, and then that's what that is. And that's going to add to the security of your JWT. So we're going to say sign. It's going to take in our payload. Then it's going to take in our secret key. So we're going to call this secret. And then optionally, we can say, well, when does it expire? Now, a web token, if you guys think about it from like a Facebook perspective, right, is sometimes you log into Facebook and you can be logged in for 30 days. And then after 30 days, you log back in and all of a sudden it says, if you click facebook.com, sometimes it just takes you to your platform, and then all of a sudden it makes you log back in again. That means because your cookie or your token has expired, right? And so you need a new one. And so here we can change the variation of how long our token lasts. Now, from a security perspective, it doesn't really make sense to have a super long JWT. Like if you had like a 60-day token, it's sort of like, well, what's the point of having a token? Because it's not really super secure, right? But a day or 3 days is normally pretty fine. It's just how often, how secure is the data you're trying to access? If you're working in the government, right, and it's some sort of secret plan, you probably, even a day is too long, right? You want to make sure that people get 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes, because they shouldn't be doing more in that file than 30 minutes, then let's go ahead and shut that down. Or if you're a bank, right? A bank does not want to keep your bank account information open for, more than a day. I think for me in my bank, if I'm inactive for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, or if I'm not doing something, that expires and I have to re-log in again. So it depends on the type of information you're securing. But that's what this expiration, this is optional. You don't have to put it. But I think getting an idea of how frequent you want this token to be created is important. So I called this secret. We don't have that. So let's come up here and let's create that. So I'm going to say const secret equals process.env secret key. Again, this is going to be used in order for us to create our token. And then the payload that I want to pass in, this is the information I want to have. I'm going to say ID equals, and then we already have this new user, right? Because that's what's going to be given back to us. So what I could say is new user dot ID. And then in this case, let's say we wanted to also keep the email. I'd say email. And then I say new user email. Perfect. Cool. So we have this user token. That's awesome. And we can console log it. Let's actually do that. .log user token. Perfect. Great. All should be working. Let's go test it out. So we have our JWT. We did that. We brought it in. I don't think I needed anything in my server for JWT. Nope. Okay. So it should work. So if I say check Calhoun, that's my dog. And I say check at c.com, I should. Oh, My server's not running. Whoopsies. Let me start my server. Cool. So now it started. If I send this. Cool. So we got Chuck, but then here, if we come, let me make this larger. Here's our web token. Right, here's the token that we're doing. There's a portion of it that has got our secret, right? And this also allows us to know our expiration date and the piece of information, right? So here's our entire token. And we can use this now, and we can use different pieces of the JWT process to go back and forth and allow us to say, well, who is this, right? Who is accessing it? How do we get information from them? Cool. And we'll see that, especially once we add in the front end, we're going to see how we can kind of use that information and go back and forth. But here's our token. So we're able to create our web token right here. Cool. And we see that here. Perfect. Now, after we do this, this is our backend. Web tokens are typically how the server is going to handle some things. And then our front end, our client is going to use cookies. And there, I mean, what I want to say is they pair together. It's for navigation in totality, but the front end is really what allows us to have cookies. Cookies is what keeps track of who you are from a client side, right? If you guys have ever heard things like, if you guys are ever Googling something, or if you're looking on Amazon at something and all of a sudden you go to another website and all of a sudden there's ads for whatever you were just Googling, that's because there's cookies and companies will sell this information or they'll keep track. Things like Brave is a great browser to limit how many things. It doesn't work with our M2 with my M1 Mac, which is kind of a bummer. But if you guys are ever curious, Brave or DuckDuckGo is another popular one as well, that you can search something on these websites, and they're all about privacy, right? They don't want you to get tracked. They don't want, they want to prevent Google from being able to track you. And if you were to look at like history somewhere, I can't remember, it's somewhere in history, then there's cookies. There's a whole bunch of cookies that will allow you to kind of see all the pieces of information. Let's see. See if I can pull it up. It's just my history.
I wonder if they named it cookie because cookies are awesome.
Cookies are awesome.
So I'm
That's a
like, well,
fact.
we're just gonna. Do you want to accept cookies? It's just like, well, who doesn't want to accept cookies?
Yeah, who wouldn't want that?
I've always kind of wondered
So,
about the name.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure where that came from. Well, let's see, cookies and other site data. So you can handle how you allow, and that's becoming more of a thing. I don't know if you guys have gone onto websites that basically are like, hey, here's all of our cookies. Here's all the things. Make sure you like, yeah, you have to accept them. That's becoming laws. Like there's a lot of laws that are, because we're getting tracked on everything, right? And Google, that's how they make a lot of their money. You think it's always the old additive. If something is free, then you are the product, right? It's like if Instagram's free, it's because they make money off of you. If Google's free, which it is, right? It's because they make money off of you. So cookies is a way that they do that. I used to work for a company called Twilio, and we had there's a portion in there that basically we had a tool, and this is what I worked on, that was able to connect you across platforms, which is kind of crazy. The tool was called Personas. And then the company was called Segment, but it was Twilio company. And then there was a segment portion. And then within that, we had a tool called Personas, and that's what I worked on. But basically the idea is that you can have cookies and it connects multiple, if you're on a laptop and you're on a computer, if you log in and you're using the same email, it'll connect the data together. So that way it can see all of your tracking and it has a profile on you so it can better market. One example, I don't know that I'm legally allowed to say this, but whatever. I didn't sign an NDA, is like Nike was our client, right? And so if there's anybody here that likes to run, Nike has a really fun app. I like it. I like it more than Strava. It's called Nike Run Club. And it's a way that you can track your runs and there's coaches and you can get coached workouts. And it's all free, right? And you're like, wow, what is the catch? Well, the whole catch is because, and this is what we worked on with them, is that you put your shoe and what shoe you're running in, right? The whole point is because a shoe has a certain lifespan. And so if it can track and know how many miles you've currently run in that specific shoe, it knows when to then target you and say, hey, do you know the life, here's this random article on how long a running shoe lasts. Oh, let's start giving them ads for a running shoe when they're getting up to the mileage and saying, hey, your shoes are kind of dying. You might need some new shoes. So it's a better way, instead of them just, trying to send you running shoes ads when you just bought them or they're brand new or a month old. They're like, that's a waste of resources. Let's actually be able to track them, have that information. We'll connect all the data via cookies, via apps, via different tools, and then we can target them better, right? And so that's the kind of things that you can use cookies with. You can go really in depth with it. We're not going to do that. We're just going to use it to be able to track. And this is the authorization, right? And what somebody is authorized to do. They're authorized to delete or add or do something like that. But cookies are going to pair with that. Sorry, that was my tangent on cookies. They're everywhere and throughout our entire lives. There are cookies. Cool. So there's some great stuff on this. And in order for us to use these, we need to be able to parse them and break them down, right? So we need to add in an extra dependency called a cookie parser. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our server.js. Perfect. And what I need to do is I need to create up here a const cookie parser, require cookie parser. And not only do I need to do that, but now I also need to app.use cookie parser. Cool. Now, because I'm doing this cookie parser, I also need to now add in this information within our course, right? That allows for credentials. Yes. Passing in our credentials, right? We'll be able to pass those back and forth. And then the origin of where this is coming from, what server we're going to be communicating in this case. In this case, we're doing localhost 3000. So I need to add in this piece of information. So let's do that. So let's go into cores. Nope. Rip right here. Let's add in this information. And this allows us to then communicate and pass in this information. Now we've already downloaded cookie parser. It's already there, but if you haven't already, you will need to install it. And you just run npm install cookie parser from there. Cool. So now, because we've done that, we have the ability to send and read cookies with each request and response, right? So now with each request, we can say who's requesting it, what are they requesting, do they have access, and then be able to manage there. Great. So how does that work with our controller, right? So we've already created our user token. We can just delete that because we have already console logged it and we've already seen that that is working, right? So now what we can do is we can, instead of returning this JSON like this, I'm going to comment this out and just saying, cool, here's this message. What I want to now do is give my cookie, right? So I'm going to say, I don't need to pass in secret here. So there's a couple things. I'm going to call this user token, right? This is the name of my cookie. Then I actually pass in my JWT that associates, right? So then here I'm going to say a couple things. I need to say HTTP only true. And then I can finish up here with my JSON response. So this is me creating my cookie, responding with it. I'm able to pass that through. This is remove this commented out code. There's not commented out code, I guess that. I'm not sure what this is. Oh, it's because I need a comma here, sorry. Perfect. Great. Cool. So now I'm able to create my cookie and pass that through. And so what will happen is let's go back, make sure my server is running. It is. I'll do Marley, my other dog. And then she is going to be Mar. I'll just do M at c.com. So when and this is upon creation, right? So upon register, we're going to send it. Cool. And we see that Marley was created. Now we also see this cookie that was created. And here is our value here. Its name is user token because that's what we called it. And some information it has is this user token right here, right? So now we're able to connect the two and say, okay, this user that was created, this token that's assigned to it, here is the cookie. That's why whenever, if you delete cookies on Google Chrome, you always have to go re-log into things because they want to make you, they want to be able to assign you a new cookie and track, right? Cool. Cool. So our register's done. We were able to create a new token. After we create a new user, we create a new token. We create a cookie so that way we can communicate from our back end to our front end. And we are good to go with this register. I also don't know why this is squiggly lined. It's basically saying that that this is redundant. I don't need this await, but I want to wait until this is done in order for it to, because if I delete it, it can check this. And sometimes that's true, even if it's not, or vice versa. Sorry. It'll basically say, no, that's not true, potential user, but it hasn't finished running. And so we're going to keep this. So I don't know why my solar lint is saying that this is redundant, because it's not, because you do have to wait till this happens in order to do this. So kind of weird, but alas, here we are. Cool. Any questions on what we've talked about, what we've done, and on cookies slash, and there's additional reading on this as well.
Curious question. So
Yeah.
when you register, you're creating the user token. I'm assuming that that information will also be assigned again when you log in.
Yeah. We're
So
gonna do login here in just a second.
So we're using it a lot like you would use session in
Yeah.
Java or Python.
Very much so. Yeah, it's just a little bit more of a enterprise slash normal way that you would do it in the actual industry. You wouldn't really just use session.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're only really supposed to use the ID that you get from session, and then you do all your API calls afterwards with
Yeah.
that token.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank
Cool. Yeah, of course. So just like you said, Robert, we're actually going to move on to login, where same sort of thing. We've taken our request and our response, right? It's just our other method now. I'm going to go ahead and add this so I start getting the curly brackets. Cool. Now, I'm going to do a try catch again. And so what I'm going to do is I first, again, want to see if the user, so this is logging in, right? We've already said, hey, is there a user that's already created this email? Or sorry, is there a user when we're creating, is there a user that already has the same email? We don't really want to do that. What we want to do is we want to basically say, well, this user is giving me an email and a password. Does this user exist, right? So I'm going to say const user equals, and then I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to say await, and then I'm going to say user dot find one. Nope. I don't want that. Find one. Perfect. I'm going to pass in my email and my rec.body email. So this is going to either give me, a user back or nothing, right? So I can say if user, I'm not going to do if user equals null. This would be, what Copilot is trying to say is basically if there's no user, then invalid login attempt. We can do that on the other side. It kind of doesn't matter how we do that. So I'm just going to say if user. And then what I need to do now is say, okay, I got a user back, right? I used the find one. I got a user back. Now I need to make sure that I am going to, that the passwords match. Now here's something that you can do. I'm not sure exactly what this is. This authenticate, I don't know where that's from, but we're going to use bcrypt to do this because remember we hashed it with bcrypt and bcrypt is the only one that's going to know how to compare that. And so what I'm going to say is const password match equals. And then I do want to await. I want to make sure that this goes through first. And I need to run this before I can do anything else. And I'm going to say bcrypt dot compare. Bcrypt dot compare. This dot compare is a built-in method. Again, bcrypt's the only one that should know where it's going to take in this rec.body.password and the actual user's password. So it's going to compare the hashed password. It's going to run this through a hash and it's going to say, are these the same? If they are, cool, right? So we need to check and say, this is going to either be true or false, right? So it's going to give us back, these are true. Yes, these are good to go. If not, this is false. So I'm going to say if passwords match, then I need to go ahead and authenticate, or we've already authenticated. Sorry, I need to do that exact same thing. I need to create a token. This token is going to have my ID and my email because that's what it has up at the top, right? It has an expires in. Then I'm going to create my cookie. That's got my user token. It's going to be called user token, same sort of thing. So I could just say, oops, same sort of thing. Const user token. It's the same code as up here, right? I'm just assigning now this token jwt.sign. We're assigning this token. Again, it's the same exact code as at the top. And then we're also creating this cookie. Perfect. Now we do need to handle, because we have a couple ifs, like what if these passwords don't match, right? So I need to create an else. And this else is just going to be some status invalid login attempt. We never want to say passwords don't match, because then what that says is, cool, I have the right email. I just need to keep trying a new password. So you always want to keep it invalid login attempt or invalid email or password. We want to keep it very, very, very vague. So that way, they have no idea. So this is going to be here. So I'm just going to make sure I indent so that way we know. Cool. So this else is for this guy. And then I also need to handle what happens if the user, right? If there is no user, if we don't find a user with that email, then I'm going to say invalid login attempt, right? I have to handle both else's, or sorry, both if statements. If the password does match, cool. And if not, what do I do? And if there is not a user, then I need to handle this guy and give a response that's basically saying invalid login attempt. Cool. Now, after this, because I have a try, I also need my catch, right? That's going to take in an error console. I can console log the error. We're good to go. Cool. So this is all I need for login. I'm going to take this code. I'm basically checking, very similar to our register to an extent, other than we're not running this create. But they are very, very similar. And so we're going to take that information. If that user, we're going to compare the passwords. If they match, meaning they gave us the right password, cool, let's log them in. We're going to handle this, and then maybe we're going to get this back. It's going to be a success. So cool, we're good to go. And then we're going to give the user back. Else, passwords did not match. We say invalid login attempt, or, oops, sorry. Or there was not a user that had that email. So then we say invalid login attempt because we don't want them to know what was wrong with it. Cool. So I need to go into my routes and I need to create an app.post for logging in, user/login. So let's go try it. Server still running. I've got login, API/users/login, login. Let's delete confirm password. Let's delete these guys and let's see what happens. So in theory, if I do this, I should get a new cookie and I should get a new body. Let's see if it breaks. Oh, yep, because I did that. Whoops. Okay, so I didn't get anything back. Bad request. M at C. API users login. Okay, I gave my email and my password. This was a bad request, so let's go check my code and see what the heck happened. I did API/users/login, user controller of login. If I come here, is there anything I needed? Nope, I've got my routes. Okay. But it doesn't say this message, right? And so if it said this, that means that my catch, there's an error. So I'm going to, let's see what this says. First and foremost, bcrypt is not defined. Ah, okay. So let's come up here. I was trying to do this bcrypt. It didn't work because I didn't define it, right? So where did I? Fonts bcrypt require bcrypt. Let's see, my server is now running. Unexpected token. Well, let's see. Still got a bad request. Still got broken code. CO is not defined at login. So let's go into my login. Where's CO? Oh, I was going to console log, but we figured it out. Cool. So I got a success. I got my password because I said I wanted to pass in, I wanted to get back my user, right? So here, if it's a success and then I get my user, so then I got all of my user, right? So I'm able to validate that this is correct. If this is not, if I say this, invalid login attempt, if I put a 6, this now works. Cool. Cool. Any questions on what we've done and what we built? And we can see that we have a cookie now. It's a different cookie. I don't know if you, I mean, obviously you probably didn't memorize it, but it's a different cookie now because we logged in. Let's see. Let's try it again and see if a new cookie comes. 9C, let's see. Yep. So you can see it's a new cookie. So every time we're logging in, it's generating and creating a new cookie for us.
When you were working professionally, was it a lot more common for you guys to build out Auth or did you guys typically use like an API like Amazon for their login registration?
Yeah, it kind of depends. Depends on the company too, right? So like if you are building like a personal dashboard, some companies like don't want you to use certain things. So maybe they're competitors, so they don't want you to use Google to authenticate. Maybe they have their own, it's called an LDAP system. And so you can either integrate into that, you can build your own authentication. There's other tools out there that you can do. I personally, like if I were you and you were building a project, unless you had these limitations, like the customer didn't want, like if you're building something for a customer and they have some contingencies, like, hey, this is a direct competitor, I don't want you to use their auth, then okay, that's understandable. If you're trying to build a tool like a Facebook, right? Or just some blanket tool that the common person is not for a company, I would personally rely on other companies because, yes, we're building out things here for security where we're hashing passwords and we're doing some of this stuff, but really from the like cryptography and the security side,
Reliability.
yeah, honestly, transparently, Google's going to hire people way smarter than me. to create the most lockdown, because that's a big deal, right? And so it's becoming more popular to use a Google, to use a Facebook, to use a GitHub, Microsoft to do that. Because you're not reliable. You're not even storing a password, right? That's the huge thing, right? Is by pushing that onto another company like a Google and using them to basically, they handle all the auth, then you're good to go. And so if you have some sort of data breach, well, your user's personal information is not getting stolen because you actually don't have any personal information. So it kind of depends on your use case, on your company, and really sort of your application. But I would say if you can get away with using somebody else's auth, it also just takes a liability off. Unfortunately, because if Google gets hacked, then maybe your customers are affected, but they're pissed at Google. They're not pissed at you. You can be like, look at Google's auth, or Amazon or Facebook or Microsoft, whatever. Versus if you get hacked, then everybody's angry at you. So
Right, because it's like if the largest corporations in the world got hacked, there was nothing I was going to do to stop it.
yeah, yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, it's like good luck, dude. If Google's getting hacked, my application's absolutely getting hacked. So yeah, totally depends. But there is instances. There's another one too that you can use. It's called Amazon Cognito. And so that is like, if you have AWS as your account, you can use Cognito to handle your management. So again, it's sort of putting it on Amazon as like
my
a
dude
user
Jacob does
management.
that because he uses all AWS services for all their deployments, for their server, for their storage, for all their API calls. It basically, I don't want to say like 2/3, but like 2/3 of that website.
Oh, for sure.
It's just APIs and all that because it just makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
we can
that's
pay
most.
a by use fee,
Yeah.
or I can build this out.
Sure. And then I've got to keep it up to date. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff. There is a sense that the cloud is, people are moving a little bit more back to on-premise, just because, especially for a startup, you can rack up a cloud bill pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, with that,
he was showing me the data charges. It goes from like $2,000 to like 25. Like, there's no middle ground.
No, it can get pretty pricey. So then you have to weigh, like, what are we doing here? What is our cost? Are we doing our pipelines the most efficient? But yeah, there is other ways to handle that if you don't want to do it. And I would say that again, we teach you this so that way you have an understanding. If I were you, I would rely on somebody else's. Amazon Cognito, I'm sure Azure for Microsoft has something, utilizing the Google Auth or the Facebook or the GitHub. Utilizing those just limits your risk. And so you just pay for login, or however, whatever that cost is. But you'd rather pay for, 2 cents for a login versus what that's going to cost you if your entire stuff gets hacked and then you lose your entire customer base. So yeah.
Facts.
Yeah. Any other questions? That's all I have for tonight. What we'll do on Tuesday is we're going to have a JWT config file that we'll need to do as well. But we can talk about that on Tuesday. It just really is what is going to allow us to authenticate and compare that. So that way we have that. And then we'll build out from the front end. We'll create a client. We'll have a form that's a login and registration, and we'll be able to pass that information. We'll be able to pass that information to and fro, and then we should have a working login and reg, I think, by Tuesday. I don't think we should go past that. So cool. Way to go, Grant. Grant just put that you finished your exam and you deployed and everything and you're feeling good. I'm really proud of you. That's awesome. I'm sure it was awesome. So way to go, dude. Great. You guys have been such a rock star class. So, well, that's all I have for you. I'll stop the recording here. I know that somebody needs some help, so I'll stop the recording here.